this is the intro to Smart Objects, and I'm quickly just going to show you some of the advantages to using Smart Objects. So I'm copying this monogram from Illustrator. It's vector, Command Y, you can see, and I'm going to copy and paste this in. So Command C to copy, Command V to paste. When I go to paste, it will always bring this dialog box up, and you have all these options, but Smart Object is the one we're working with, so I'm just going to make sure I have that clicked. Again, I always like to uncheck current library unless it's an asset that I think I can use in different files. So I'm going to hit OK. The transform tools are there. If you hit enter or return to apply it, and then you can see here it says Vector Smart Object, and I have this little Smart Object icon in the thumbnail. Okay, so I am going to duplicate this just so I can do a little example here of what I mean by the advantages. So the very basic, the most basic advantage is non-destructive editing and preserving image size. Okay, so to just kind of like show that point, demonstrate that, I'm going to rasterize this PK layer here, and I'm going to, just shrink this down super small. This is like 3.5% of the original, and I can actually just copy that up here to make sure it's the exact same here. Okay, so you can see in this one file I have the Vector Smart Object with this little icon in the thumbnail, and here, even though it says Vector Smart Object, I've rasterized it, so that's that Smart Object capability is gone now, and so that little icon is not in the corner anymore. Now again, this is just a layer name. Even though it says Vector Smart Object, I can name it whatever I want. So again, don't be fooled by that. Now I'm going to hit Command T and just bring this up in size again, back to close to what it was. And you can already see here, but when I'm sizing it up, it looks very pixelated. And then when I hit enter, you can see it's pretty blurry. It kind of lost, all its sharpness, and it really lost a lot of the information that was there to begin with. So I'm going to go to this one, the Smart Object, and do the same thing. And you can see it's just as crisp as it was. It preserved all of that. And now, again, another benefit is that I can always go back to that vector now. Okay, so I have this vector preserved in this file. And what I mean by that is when I double click on this, it's going to launch a Vector Smart Object window in Illustrator, and you will have your vector again. And you can change the color of it, and if you save this Smart Object, Command S, and then I go back, you can see it updates that in the file. Okay, so not only does this preserve image quality, but it also preserves the actual vector, and I always had that in this file now. Okay, now this is one version of a Smart Object. There's other ways you can use them. You can link files, which I will show momentarily. But again, it doesn't matter what you do with this. You make it big, make it small, make it big again. And when you're talking about vector, the beauty of that is you can make it even bigger than the actual sizes, and it still preserves that crispness of the image quality. So you can see, even though I've sized this way bigger than I brought it in, it's super crisp. That's the beauty of a Vector Smart Object. But another thing that you need to understand with Vector Smart Objects is that they are limited in their controls, especially for transforming them. So what you would then do is create a nested Smart Object. And all that is doing is, now I have a Vector Smart Object, and I'm just gonna hit Command T so you can see my transform tools. I have my basic transforms available, and I even have some distort tools available. So for example, if I click on this point and then hold Command, I can, warp this like as a skew. Like I could skew this to the left or right, and I can move it up and down as I'm doing that. But if I go to try to click and distort any corner, click, hold, and then Command, it still only skews it. It won't distort it from that point. But if I convert this into another smart object within this, so even though this is a vector smart object, I'm going to hold control and click on this layer, or right click and convert to smart object again. And now it's what we refer to as a nested smart object. So when I hit Command T here, now I can warp this just like any other image smart object. Okay. And I'm just going to illustrate really quickly again the benefit of the sizes of these. So I'm just going to close this for now, not save that, and then just really quickly with an image, let you know that even though this isn't a vector smart object, this is an image file, I can still create a smart object from that image file to preserve things. So if I hold control and click on this background layer, or if I right click on it, convert to smart object, it works the same way. I can size this down, you know, let's say around 5%, hit OK, and then when I do the same thing here, Command T, you know, again, I'm going to size this down to about 5%. And again, this is just copying what I did earlier. And you can see when I go to size this up again, it's blurry. It lost a lot of that definition and quality. But when I do it with the smart object, it's just as crisp and perfect as when I started it. Now, another advantage is that I've created this smart object. If I double click it, you can see, you know, this versus this. Again, that thumbnail little icon is not there. I launched this, and this is that original image, preserved, non-destructive. And, you know, the original image was RGB. So again, just to understand, one of the advantages, if I change the color profile of this image to CMYK, so I can work with my CMYK adjustments, and don't rasterize. Anytime you have any you know, warning dialog box that pops up that asks you to do things, usually don't do them, so you can preserve things. Unless you have to like get rid of adjustment layers. If you're converting from RGB to CMYK and you have some adjustment layers, you have to get rid of those. But again, I have a CMYK file, so I can, you know, do any CMYK adjustments I want to on this. But then know that my smart object is still there, and I still have that RGB original smart object preserved. Okay. So I am gonna close this now, and then just show you a couple other things with smart objects. So, you know, with nested smart objects, we know we can warp them. You know, this is from another tutorial where we have different warps, more basic ones, you know, and then some slightly more advanced ones. And then, you know, another thing we know that they're good for is, you know, mockups. So, for example, I have this label on this beer bottle here, and when I double click, again, this is a nested smart object, so this is the image one, right? So this is my warp is on here. I'm just going to show you Command T and go to warp, so you can see that I've created this warp to create this distortion to wrap it around the bottle. But essentially, when I launch this smart object, this ps.psb large document format, it has the nested vector smart object in there. So I can double click that, and sorry that I still had an original open, but I can double click that, and it will launch this smart object in Illustrator. I can change the color of the background if I want. Command S, save it, and it will update my original PSB here. And if I save that, it will update it on this beer bottle. And, you know, just so you can understand how smart objects work, any smart object that I have in a file, if I duplicate this now, you know, again, this is just another copy of the smart object. I'll make 2 copies just so you can see, and then change something in it again. And again, I can either go back to the vector and just change, you know, the background and save it. And then, you know, again, it saves in this image smart object, the first nest, and then I save it here. It saves it in all the smart objects that you copied from it. And where that is really helpful is things like shelf sets. So actually with this shelf set, I don't have it as a smart object copied in as vector, but what I have it is a link. And this is another way you can add smart objects, is by linking images. So this happens to be a linked PNG. Now again, when it's a link smart object, you'll see this little link icon here, rather than the little smart object icon that you see in these thumbnails. Okay, so again, it's really easy to, when you make copies of it, just update the links. So I'm gonna control click on this layer, part of the layer here, or right click, and then you can relink the file. And this is how you would link the file in the first place. And then I'm just gonna choose a different color alt of that, place it, and you can see it updates all of them. Okay, I'm gonna hit Command Z so you can see that, and Command Option Z. But basically I copied this file, and it's masked and everything now, but it basically is just replacing all of them at once now. So that's a great way to use this. And then like I said, if I want to just add a link, I can go to File, Place Linked, and then I can add whatever the link is. So I'm going to add back that original one, and then this is how I did it in the first place. So I'm editing it above a mask just so you can see, but I masked this, masked the front panel here, and then I just made this really small. And you can add some effects to it if you want, like bevel and emboss, to give it a little edge to it or whatever, so it looks like it's dimensional. And then I just copied this by holding Option and dragging it a couple times. And again, I'm just doing this so you can understand. And so these are all copies of that same one. So when I go to relink this now, hold Control click, relink to file, and I'm just gonna pick that same one, and you can see it just updates all of them. Okay, so these are all just illustrating some of the advantages of using smart objects and different things you can do with them.